Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Anenson, and I am really excited to be with you today. And I want to start by asking you this question. How has God given and grown your faith? Just think about that for a moment. How has God given and grown your faith? In other words, what has God used over the years to bring you to where you are today in your relationship with Him? I've asked hundreds of people this question over the past decade or so. And there's one thing that always seems to rise to the top of the list, and that's relationships. Whether it's a parent or a grandparent, a coach or a pastor, relationships seem to be the thing that God uses to give and grow faith in Him. This has certainly been the case for me. Starting with my parents growing up and a Bible study leader in high school, some friends in college, and mentors today. I can trace my journey of growth in faith in Jesus through those relationships over the years. The people that have invested in my life. One of the times this happened to me in a really significant way was during seminary. I was a part of a Bible study that happened to be using the Master Builder's Bible that Lutheran Men Mission produces. And there's a guy in my group named Sean, and he starts talking to me about Lutheran Men Mission. I have no idea what this ministry is. And the next thing I know, I'm on the phone with the executive director named Doug, and he's inviting me to be his intern. And I'm still trying to figure out who's Doug and who's Lutheran Men Mission. But what I was soon to find out is that God was going to bless me abundantly through this man and through this ministry in some really significant ways. And so I said yes to this invitation to be an intern with Lutheran Men in Mission for a year. And then that continued as I continued to serve on the Young Men's Ministry Council for several years after that. And during this time, my faith grew so much. And in hindsight, I look back and look at what Doug and some of the other men on the board were doing. They followed kind of a three-step process. They identified me, they invited me, and they invested in me. First of all, they identified me as someone who might be open to relationship, open to joining them in ministry. And then they invited me. They were intentional about it. They invited me to be an intern, to join them in ministry and relationship. And then they invested in me. They got to know my story, my joys and my struggles. They shared their wisdom and their story with me. We ate deep dish Chicago pizza together and brainstormed about the future of the church. They gave me space to try things, to do real ministry, to cast vision for young men's ministry, to write a part of a book that was produced and be a part of events that they were doing. This space for doing real legitimate ministry alongside of them grew me so much as they invested in my life as well. And so this has shaped me so much, and so much of what I learned and experienced in those years working intentionally with Lutheran Men in Mission has shaped my ministry today as I serve as a pastor. And it shaped my personal ministry. I try to keep my radar screen open for where's God at work? Who are those men that have come across my path that God's calling me to identify, invite, and invest in. As a pastor, it can be challenging sometimes to keep this on the forefront of my life. Because so often what happens is I get sucked into the life of the church, which is good. Writing sermons, leading staff, casting vision, keeping ministry flourishing. But what it can do is put that simple ministry of identifying, inviting, and investing in the lives of other men on the back burner. I can just get so busy doing and running church that I forget to simply be the church. And so I need accountability. I need intentionality to keep that simple practice on the forefront of my life. I've been blessed with some other men in this congregation who share a heart for investing in other men. You see, when they were younger, they too had older men invest in them, that identified them and invited them into relationship and in ministry and invested in their life, and it's shaped them. It's what's made them the leaders they are in our church today. And they're living this out now. One of them is doing this with other men in his workplace, being the church right there in the midst of real life. He's leading a prayer group with several other men from his business. So cool. And so we've been talking about how do we bring this vision to others? How do we multiply this in our congregation and beyond? And so they've been working on developing some training materials. It's not something that needs tons of training because it's kind of simple. It's not brain surgery. It's simply building relationships with other men and letting the life of Christ flow through you. It's watching where God's at work and joining him there. It's not rocket science, but it takes intentionality. And so we want to develop a little bit of training and then just a network of people who are willing to invest in others. Mentors who come alongside other men to identify and invite and invest and point them to Jesus and allow God to work in us and through us and do what only he can do. And so I'm really excited to see where this goes. Because this is how we grow, isn't it? It's by other people identifying and inviting and investing in our lives. This is how we experience a bold and daring faith. It's by seeing it lived out in those around us. I've heard it said, faith is more often caught than taught. And so, we learn to be a godly husband and father, not always through reading a book, but by being around someone who is a godly husband and father. We learn to pray by praying with other men. We learn about the power of God to overcome addiction and apathy and anger and whatever issue we may be facing by being around people who have experienced that themselves and tell us those stories, and we can see the difference that God makes in their life. You see, this is how God works. If we want to be bold and daring followers of Jesus Christ, that happens by being around other bold and daring followers of Jesus Christ. If we want to see that multiplied in the lives of other men, we got to be in relationship with them. We got to identify, invite, and invest. And so this is my challenge to you. Will you join in God's work of building relationships, of identifying, inviting, and investing in other men? And so just think about this for a moment. Identify. Who is it that God's calling you to invest in? You see, I believe this isn't our work. This is God's work primarily. It's his mission. God is already at work in the lives of men around you. The only question is, will you join him there? And so who is that man that God's already opened up, that God's already at work in their life? And you can simply identify that and join him there. And then take a step. Invite him into something. Invite him into conversation. Invite him to join you in a hobby. Invite him to join you in some way that you're following Jesus. Attending worship, but joining him on men's ministry. Whatever the case may be, invite him into something. And then third, invest. Invest in his life. Get to know his story, his joys, his struggles, his dreams, his frustrations. Be a good listener. And then share your story along the way of your life that's been impacted by Jesus. Not made perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but just you have the hope of the Lord in you. let that shine. Identify, invite, and invest. One man at a time. This is how God changes lives. Now, I don't know about you, but it's easy to hear a challenge like this and you think, well, that sounds great for someone else. But that's not for me. That sounds too out there, too hard. I don't think I can do it. You know, this reminds me of the story of Moses in the Bible, where God shows up in his life through a burning bush and calls him to be a part of what he's doing. God's gonna set his people free from slavery. God's already decided he's going to do that. He's just simply inviting Moses to be a part of that. But Moses, of course, has all sorts of excuses, all sorts of reasons this is not a good idea. You know, who am I to do this? I can't do this. What if they don't listen to me? And, I'm just not a good speaker. And he was on and on about all these excuses. And what is God's response to him? God says, I'll be with you, Moses. And I think that's the exact same word that God has for us today. Because we have our excuses, we have our fears, we have this hesitancy sometimes about identifying, inviting, and investing in the lives of other men. But God comes alongside us and says, I am with you. I am already at work. I've already decided I'm going to be working in the lives of these men in your life. But will you join me? Will you join me in this adventure of being my church, being my men? Will you join me and see me at work, even through you, even through me? God is calling us to identify, invite, and invest in the lives of other men. And he wants us to know, without a doubt, that he will be with us. And so let's join God in what he's doing. God bless you all.